Okay, so I wanted to go back a little bit to this Nashville numbering system and talk a bit about the the typical major, those diatonic major chords, all those related chords, right? The 1 chord, the up to the 7 chord, and what their function is. And you might see people talk about dominant chords or subdominant chords or tonics. So I want to just talk about those 3 in relation with the Nashville numbering system, and sort of give an overview of the function and describe a little bit about what those things mean. So I'm going to start with the tonic chords. So just a quick recap, the Nashville number system, and it relates like hand in hand with like your major modes. You have a 1 chord. I'm gonna keep things simple and stay in the key of G major, like my other videos, just to be consistent. But your 1 chord is for G in the key of G major would be the G major chord itself. That's the 1 chord. The 2 chord would be A minor. The 3 chord would be B minor. The 4 chord would be C major. The 5 chord would be D. The 6 chord would be E minor. The 7 chord would be the F sharp diminished. And then back to the 1 chord. So each of those chords have a corresponding number, 1 through 7 respectively, and they follow the interval steps of the major scale. So there's each of those chords is divided into a category on what its function is in that key, and they call it, it either has a tonic function, a dominant function, or a subdominant function. And basically what that means really simply is a tonic function means that it sounds like it's at rest, it's resolved. There's a restful sound to it. It sounds like it's found its home. Okay? The dominant, on the other hand, is the extreme opposite of that. There's only 1 dominant chord in the diatonic chords, and that's off the 5th interval. And it sounds extremely unresolved in relation to the other chords. It wants to go to a tonic chord. That would be its. It doesn't mean you have to go to a tonic chord. It just means it makes your ear think, oh, and that's a weird expression, I'm sure, but your ear hears that dominant chord, and it's used to hearing it go back to the 1. You hear that turnaround and used so often. It doesn't mean it has to, but it wants to move, and so you can play with that. So there's the tonic sound, which is very restful, the dominant sound, which is very unrestful, and then there's a subdominant, which is restless and wants to move, but not as intensely as the dominant. So I'm just going to tell you what those are, and look at a couple of. I want to look at a couple of like really common, chord sequences, and do a quick analysis to say, well, what's going on here, and maybe take a moment to discuss the sort of the tension building and resolution phases of the chord sequence, and it'll help you understand like how to use these as devices for writing, or for, you know, tweaking the chord progressions that you have, maybe to add a little bit, add a little bit more dynamic harmonic tension and release. Okay, so so the one chord is your tonic. It's the most powerful, most restful. In G major, there's two tonic chords. There's the G major and there's the E minor. Those two sound very restful. They're happy. They're quite happy to stay there. They're very at rest, and that can be a problem at times, because it's sort of like, once you land there, how do you get out of there? It feels resolved, and there's ways of like, there's ways of moving out of those, obviously, but keep that in mind. I was at a clinic once upon a time, and one of the teachers said, you know, one of the worst things you can do is, like, you know, resolve to the one chord and just hang there. It's like you can get stuck there. So you want to find ways of like moving back out of there, because to be at rest for an extended period of time gets boring. But anyways, the tonic chords, it's the one chord and the sixth chord. Let's talk about the dominant chord. I think I talked about that already. In the case of G major, it's the 5 chord, which I did a couple videos, and I think you should check them out. There's a lot of stuff you can do with the 5 chords. So there's your 1. In relation to that tonic, does that ever sound good? So the only one left is the subdominant, and so we've got 1, 6, and 5 covered so far. All of the rest are subdominant, meaning, and some will argue that the 3 chord is a tonic chord, and I don't, sure, it doesn't sound like a tonic chord to me, but to me the 3 chord sounds like it wants to go to sounds like it wants to move. It's not quite as restful as the 1 and the 6. But anyways, for now, I want to treat those subdominants. Let's treat it as a subdominant for now. And that means basically that it's restless and wants to move, but it's not, it's sort of intermediate when it comes to how unstable it is or how restless it is. So I'm going to play those subdominants in relation to the 1. And I did do a video showing each of these, but I didn't name them specifically as subdominants. I didn't categorize them as dominant or tonic. But I want you to hear how they sound next to the 1, which is sort of like your most resolved sounding tonic. So the 2 to the 1. So the 2 chord is a subdominant. You can hear that it wants to, it's happy to move down to that 1. Is it as, that's the 5, okay? Let's play the 3. So the 3 would be B minor. To me it sounds like not restless quality about it. That's why I put it in the subdominant category. And it actually wants to, my ears hear this. I hear it wanting to resolve to the tonic 6. That's what I hear, and I think a lot of other people would argue the same. The 4 chord. This is a subdominant. The C. We've already talked about the 5. The D. It's very restless. Expressing the triad type chords. I'm not moving into the 7th. If you start adding a 7th, that tritone really is unstable. I'm just playing the simple D major. And we talked about the 6th chord. It's a tonic. Restful. And then there's the diminished, the 7th, the 7 chord, and that's excuse me, it's pretty restless. It's great for resolving to the tonics. It's I'd say it's more powerful sounding than the 2 subdominant or the 4 subdominant. It sounds like it just wants to move to that 1. It wants to move to the 6. It's all right. So there you have it. You've got your tonics, there's the 1 and the 6. Your subdominants, which are the 2 chord, the 4 chord, and the 7 chord. And I would argue the 3 chord, but that's up for debate. Some people say it's kind of a tonic-y. And yeah, I just made that word up. And of course the dominant, which occupies the 5 position. It stands alone and it dominates. So just to end real quick, gonna show I'll go through, let's go through two typical chord progressions, and look at what their sort of what their harmonic tension profile looks like. First one, and I use this one a lot because I think it's you just see it in so many places, in gospel and soul and R&B and rock and roll and hip hop, and doesn't, you know, this 1-4-5 progression is just so ubiquitous. But if we look at that one in the key of G, we've got the one chord, which is a tonic, right? You've got the 4 chord, which is subdominant, right? And then you've got the 5 chord, which is the dominant. And you got it coming back to the 1, that 5-to-1 resolution. So if you look at the profile, it's at rest, and then we go to that subdominant, and we've got some restlessness. We go to the 5, it's very restless, very unstable, but then we get that resolution on the 1. So that's a good example. I'll show you another one you'll see in you know, that's used all the time in jazz. It's basically like a 1-4-5. It's just use the 2 instead of the 4, so you get a I'll just do this typical turnaround. You get the 2 chord. Forgive my technique. I'm not really a guitar player. So there you have a subdominant on the 2 to the dominant on the 5, resolving to the 1. You hear that all the time. Not just jazz, you hear it in pop and all sorts of stuff. One more. This one's used, you hear this has probably been used in 1,000 songs too. The 1-6-2-5 progression, which goes like this. So basically what you've got there is a tonic, moving to a tonic at the 6, going to a subdominant on the 2, moving to a dominant on the 5, which makes us want to move back to the 1. And of course there's better ways to play all those chord progressions. I'm trying to keep it super simple here to illustrate the concepts. But basically you want to use that knowledge to help understand what the different diatonic chords are going to do in relation to your sort of key center, or your home chord. Call it a home chord. You know, like wherever you've established this point of restfulness. And sometimes people really tease it out, you know, they only give you a small taste of restfulness, but it's there. And anyway, it's just useful to know, you know, what colors you have in your palette when you're building these paths towards these restful home chords, or the tonics. Anyways, comments, criticisms, kick me's, and whatever else. All right, cool.